And we're back with Conversations with Great Minds. I'm joined by the American economist and author James K. Galbraith, professor at the University of Texas, chair of the board of Economists for Peace and Security, and author most recently of the book, The Predator State. Welcome back, Professor. Your father talked in the great crash of '29, and I believe that you have spoken about this as well, about this notion of a speculative mood being the kind of thing that could bring about another crash. Isn't there a strong movement afoot of a speculative mood, as it were, and virtually an industry devoted to encouraging it?
You know, actually, I do not see that strongly at the present. I think the last time we experienced an ebullient speculative mood in the country was in the late 1990s, when a great many people got very enthusiastic about the information technology boom, and to some degree with good reason. Lots of interesting things were going on, and people were working very hard on them, and overall the economy was prospering, and the unemployment rate was very low. I don't think that was true in the 2000s in housing. What was happening in the 2000s was in many ways a vast criminal operation. A very large share of the subprime mortgages were refinancings. A very large share of those were cash-out refinancing. Often loans that were going to be unsustainable were peddled to people who might have qualified for prime loans and who might have been all right if they'd taken them. I don't think this was a speculative boom nearly so much as it was a vast raid on the home equity of the middle class and the lower middle class. And as of right now, I don't see it. I see speculation, certainly. I think there's a common movement, actually, in commodities, in gold, in the stock market, and against the dollar. All of these things are, in fact, part of the same speculative movement, but it's not very broadly based. I think it is an operation that is carried out by a relatively small number of very big players, and not one that represents anything like a mass sentiment.
You've spoken in the past about how, rather than going back to bubble economies, that we really need to establish a new economic basis. Please, again, correct me if I'm mischaracterizing my recollection of your words. Mm-hmm. And that a green economy, for example, that President Obama laid out during the campaign could provide the basis for that. In the last 6 months, 2 of the 3 largest solar companies in the United States, one has moved all their manufacturing facilities to China. The other just moved a 100,000 or more square foot R&D facility to China. How is it going to be possible for us to rebuild an industrial base in the United States, or any kind of a base that is non-bubble based, non-speculation based, as long as we don't have some sort, in some way, some sort of protectionist system, or like we had from 1793 to the 1990s, arguably?
Well, I think one has to recognize that China exists. It's not going to change, and it's not going to go away. We have to live in a world where the Chinese economic engine is present. And so our responsibility is to work out how to have a successful economy given that fact. And I think we could do it. I think there are a great many things that can be done here that cannot be done in China. A great many areas where the Chinese cannot compete, and in fact probably wouldn't try to compete with us. And also a great many things that we need to do, jobs that cannot be outsourced. I mean, looking at the energy area, a great deal of what needs to be done has to do with the way we use energy, with the way buildings waste energy, with the structure of our transportation systems, with the way agriculture works in this country. If we went over all of these problems and attempted to solve them in a serious way, we would create a great deal of employment and have a more viable economy going forward. The problem is that we're not doing that. We are not trying to set in an organized way a strategic direction for the economy. And we need to. We need to because the government needs to have a sense of what it's doing, and because the private sector needs to have a kind of reliable signpost as to where the profitable opportunities are going to be. One of the things that made the 1990s work reasonably well was that people got into the spirit of the new communications technology. The opportunity was there, and as time went on, more and more private businesses realized that this was a place where you could get financing and you could take, it was a good direction for taking business risk. And I don't see that as being a clearly understood, well appreciated fact these days about the energy area. I mean, yes, people understand that that's the future, but where's the money and where's the assurance that if you really commit to it, that you have a reasonable chance of doing well in 3, 5, 10, 15 years?
It sounds to me, if we aggregate these things that you just described, that we're looking at a period of tremendous weakness and danger. Would that be a reasonable characterization?
Yes, and the thing I fear is drift, stagnation, and generalized disappointment, which also means that for private business, which is an essential piece of the economy, there just isn't the kind of optimism there that would get them into the act and have them contributing in a really serious and successful way to the recovery of employment.
Well, and on top of that, we have the Republicans who control the House of Representatives all subscribing not just to deficit hawk language, but beyond that, and many Democrats, including many in this administration, talking that way. You've said the deficit hawks don't know what they're talking about or how an economy works. Can you speak to that, please?
Well, there are a couple of basic points. One is that I think people have forgotten that the government is part of the economy, that government spending is private income. The government writes a check to private individuals. Those individuals then have money to spend that they don't otherwise have. And so when you go ruthlessly cutting government spending just for the sake of cutting it and indiscriminately, you're going to be shrinking the private economy as a result. And people have some idea that if the government goes down, the private economy will sort of automatically, spontaneously grow to take up the slack, but that's just not the case. The private economy can lapse into underemployment and stagnation, and that's very much the risk. I think beyond that, there is a very ancient notion, which actually has a strong basis in the history of economic thought in the 18th and 19th centuries, that some activities are intrinsically productive and others are not. And I think that's that is a way of thinking about the world which just does not appreciate the importance of things that we do today in modern times that weren't necessary and weren't present 2 or 3 centuries ago. The structures of regulation that are required to make advanced systems functional, the networks of care, of education, of health care, of support for the environment that were not really factors in the 18th and 19th centuries. These things are very large parts of our economy today, and they're indispensable. Without them, whole sectors of activity would simply collapse. I like to say nobody would get on an airplane if they didn't have complete confidence that a completely independent Federal Aviation Administration was conducting air traffic control in a successful way. Because no matter how good they think the airlines or the planes are, they would not be comfortable if there was a high risk that they would run into each other in the sky.
Yeah, the argument that I make when I talk with libertarians and conservatives is that a football game without goalposts or referees makes no sense. You're suggesting more eloquently, I think, that regulation not only is a useful and desirable thing, but that it actually is necessary and arguably even establishes or makes markets.
Everything that we do, practically everything, has a framework of regulation around it. But think about the food that we eat, and we rely on it to be transported over long distances from sources that we cannot inspect. And if we did not think that, that the fresh produce was reasonably clean and safe to eat, we would simply not eat it, and that market would collapse. There is no market for lettuce in China, precisely because the Chinese consumer does not have confidence that a product that's meant to be eaten raw will be safe. Actually, there is a market for lettuce in China. You can get it in one place, and that's Sam's Club. That is to say, the Chinese consumer will buy lettuce that has been produced in California under American standards.
That's quite remarkable. If I could just go back just a little bit to this concept of a dangerous period in the 2 minutes or so we have left. The Tea Party, I think, reflected a genuine populist rage, although albeit misdirected by its leaders in many ways. And now we have the U.S. Uncut movement that is, shutting down the Bank of America for having 113 offshore facilities that don't pay taxes, and going after ExxonMobil and whatnot. Where do you see this dangerous period / populism moving?
Well, I think that there's a fundamental problem inside the Democratic Party, which has been true for a long time, but it's very, very visible now, which is that you can't have a single political party that represents the predators and the prey equally effectively, and one where all of the basic decisions are being guided by, where you have this, by the financial sector, essentially. We have the phenomenal development that 2.5 years after the financial crisis, the same people are back dominating the airwaves talking about the federal debt and deficit and being taken seriously on this subject. And nothing is being said, very little being said about unemployment, about foreclosures, or about the energy and environmental issues, which are the real substance of the actual economic and social problems that the American public faces. This is extraordinary, and I think there has to be a serious discussion, a serious change inside the Democratic Party so that we can actually recover an effective two-party system.
Dr. James K. Galbraith, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Well, my pleasure, as always.